Hush, I'm sure we've all realized in our lifetime that when you're alone everything seems more scary, and things that normally wouldn't happen, happen now. This is not a story to read in the dark to scare the pants off you, or to make you unable to sleep tonight. That is not the reason I am posting, but if that happens then I am sorry, but maybe that's why you're reading. The main reason is so their story gets told, because I think that's what they want. Call me crazy. Maybe I am. This story takes place a little over. Well, it started like 4 or 5 years ago, I suppose, and hasn't stopped since. Let's start with saying my first love had moved, but was on a trip back to Wyoming to see me when he was killed in a car accident in Phoenix, Arizona. We had gotten into a fight the night before, and I told him not to bother coming anymore, but, being as hard-headed as he was, he came anyway. I don't understand, because he always wore a seatbelt, but for whatever reason, he didn't have it on that morning. He was 17 at the time. I got a phone call the next morning from his mother, and I was devastated. For those of you who know the pain of a loved one lost, I'm sorry. For those of you that don't know, I pray you never have to find out. About 3 months after the incident, I'd start waking up gasping for breath. If you've ever had that feeling where you wake up suddenly, usually at 3 a.m., and you have that terrible feeling in your body like something just awful is near you. You're terrified to move or even hardly breathe. Eyes finally open, adjusting to the dark, I'd see nothing. I was so scared I just wanted to cry, and once I think I did start crying, then the feeling would automatically shrink, and I'd notice a figure in the corner of my room. I thought if anyone was in my house it'd be best to warn everyone by a scream rather than sit there silently. I quickly turned my bedside lamp on, and turned back to where the figure had been to find nobody there. I thought I had lost my marbles. This went on for the next 2 years, but eventually, somewhere along in those 2 years, I got used to this. The figure would never harm me, and seemed to make the bad feeling in my room go away, so I figured it was my sweetheart of a guardian angel just watching over me. At least, that's what I liked to believe, to keep what was left of my sanity. Well, just shortly after my 16th birthday, things changed. A couple of friends and I had decided to go on an adventure out to the Chinese tunnels. Chinese tunnels are an urban legend of haunted railroad tracks right outside of Evanston, Wyoming. Long story short, the Chinese workers were used to build the tunnels, and when they died they were buried in the walls, for lack of filling to use. If you go there at night you can hear crying, whispers, and occasionally see shadows walking. Creepy, right? We had gone there tons of times, and we'd tell scary stories before we'd go in to get an even better scare. Of course we'd see things and hear voices, but nothing real bad ever happened, until my friends brought in a video camera, taunting whatever was in there, "Show yourself," and "I don't believe in ghosts," and finally, "Come get me," and taking pictures of the walls, and down the way, shadows lighting up with every flash of the camera, while I am looking like a goober yelling. They don't mean it. They're just trying to scare themselves. Please don't take it the wrong way. When suddenly at the other end of the tunnel I see something running to us. The idiots turn and start recording. When I take off running out to the truck, not even 30 seconds later, they come running to the truck as well. Then we tore off out of there. We get back to my house and look through the pictures, finding nothing but a bunch of dust floating around. No floating spirits, no red eyes, no sharp teeth. But then we watch the video. You can hear the occasional curse of one of my friends as they realize what we were looking at, and then too much shaking to even realize what's going on. But we paused the image at just the right time to see a dark, humanly disfigured shadow in the distance, which was what had chased us, along with even stopping to film the horror we just witnessed. The idiots also deleted our proof, and for whatever reason, whatever had chased us in the tunnels, even after I apologized, followed me home. That night, while going to bed, a frame fell off my wall. I jumped up, and on my way to get the frame, my bed started shaking. I screamed, and heard a groan, and then all movement stopped. Tears in my eyes, I looked around the room to find nothing out of the ordinary other than a broken frame. My mom came into the room alarmed, and I told her the ghosts were redecorating. At last, when I got the guts to turn off the light and lay down, I heard footsteps down the hallway. Now, my house is carpeted, so in order for me to hear footsteps they'd have to be all but stomping. Whatever was coming was not happy. I cringed when whatever it was should have showed up in my doorway, but it never did. The footsteps stopped and I felt like it was staring at me, and the fear in my body was so great that it hurt. The awful feeling rose and I couldn't move, and then the footsteps turned around and left. With every step it got quieter, and the evil disappeared, and to this day, I swear I saw my guardian angel appear in the corner of my room. like he always does, but that time, he whispered something very quietly, very calmly, and very sweetly, "Hush." Now, this is one of the many paranormal experiences I've encountered, but this is the only one that ever brought me to tears to retell. The thing is, with every story you'll hear someone tell, there's always one spirit whose actions are extreme. They want to be known, and I feel like it's our job to make them. I opened the door to demonic spirits when I was 17. I opened a door that should have remained closed. I was at the public library and checked out a book about demons. I was always an avid reader, and to me, it was just another horror book. I checked out for 2 weeks. I really had no concept of demons. I believed in God, but just not so much in the other end of things. I had the concept of God and angels, and if they were truly in heaven, then nothing bad could be there. They protected us, right? That very concept changed forever. Hello, crash course in free will. I ended up reading the book, and the next thing I know, I started seeing the shadows, the dark ones. Some looked like crows, some black cats, and then the smaller humanoid types. There was one, more human, who was taller, dark, and he was everywhere. If I was reading, I could see his shadow, leaning over my shoulder as if reading with me. He would also be on the roof, hanging down, peering into my window. I could see his form, blocking out light, and hanging there upside down, like a crouching bat. He had pointed ears, and I will never forget that silhouette against the starry sky, watching me. My sister began seeing these things, too. We both saw what looked like fighting, bolts of blue and white lightning that streaked across darkened rooms at each other. The most amazing occurrence was when we were at the movies and the whole theater was a battleground, with us being the only ones who could see the lights. In retrospect, I do believe it was good and evil fighting. I think I was more curious and mesmerized than concerned by all of this going on until one evening, I was lying across my bed, reading as usual, and I felt a hand touch my foot, hard pressure on the sole of my foot, grasping. That scared me. Whatever this was could touch me. The end came quickly to this situation. A couple of days later, late one Friday night, I was home alone, and my mom and sister drove up in the headlights of the car. My sister saw a huge demon, hairy and tall, like a buffalo on its hind legs, and it was running around the house, trying to escape the headlights. My mom didn't see it, nor did she or my dad ever see any of these happenings. My sister thought it had been after me, and she was terrified. Her fear was palpable as she told me what she saw. She told me to take care of this and get it the hell out of our home. I was horrified. The very next morning, a Saturday, I found myself home alone, a godsend in a house where Saturday mornings were the optimum time for everyone being home. I cleansed the house, blessed the house, and got that book the hell out of there and never saw it again at the library, even though the section of horror I perused was near where I found it. I hope it was removed from the shelves and destroyed. Funny thing, I have a feeling it never made it back to the shelves. I have a strong feeling it was never supposed to be there in the first place. The thought of burning the book never crossed my mind. I just wanted things sent back to hell where they belonged, and all things in my world back to where they had been before I succeeded in clearing the house of all evil. No more shadows, lights, touches, or seeing anything ever again. The downside is I will always regret having my sister feel that horror and fear. The upside is that my faith in all that is good was strengthened beyond all that I could have imagined. I know now what's out there, and I will use my belief to send it away every chance I get. I hold that faith close to this day. These things were getting stronger, more brazen, and I never want to even consider opening any doorway again. I was uninformed, stupid for doing that, and utterly ignorant for bringing that into my home. This all occurred in a 2-week period, and I thank God, my faith was intact. I was considerably blessed that I realized the problem was growing beyond me, and that I had the strength to send it back. I hope someone learns from this. It's not a game, it is real and it is awful. I think my son is seeing a spirit. I live in the house I grew up in as a child in Corpus Christi, Texas. I am 28 and we moved there when I was 2. I remember having an experience in my bedroom as I was going to sleep. I was probably between 4 or 5 years old. I had a children's movie viewer and I saw something jump out of it. First it was a lady. I talked to it, said hello, and then it changed into a few other things. Can't really remember, but it never talked back. Finally it changed into a fox or dog maybe and ran out of my room. I remember being terrified at first, but then when it ran I called it back, wanting to ask questions since it wasn't scary looking. I never had an experience after that. I got married about 4 years ago and now have a 19-month little boy. I bought my house from my parents who have retired and moved out of town. My son sleeps in the same room I did when I was a child. We have officially lived there by ourselves for a little over a month and he has never had any problems going to sleep. He has a children's music box that hangs on his crib and plays music. Our nightly bedtime ritual has been the same. He takes a bath, brushes his teeth, and then we read a story, turn on his music, turn off the light and close the door. He puts himself to sleep. He never cries, always just lies down and goes to sleep by himself. About 3 days ago this all changed. Sunday night, I put him to bed as usual and went to go fold laundry in my room, which is in the back of the house. I heard my son fussing a little, but sometimes he plays or fusses and then goes to bed. This time he started screaming and crying like I have never heard out of him before. He climbed out of his crib and started banging on his door screaming, "Mama, mama, mama." Of course I ran to his aid and tried to calm him down. I took him back to his bed, but he was in a panic, so I took him to my room for a bit, and then after we both settled down I took him back to his room and rocked him until he fell asleep. I closed his door and went to bed. At 1 a.m. he woke up screaming again in the same petrified tone, so I just put him in bed with my husband and I so we could sleep through the night. During the day and even in the evening he is not afraid to go into his room and play or go get his toys as long as the light is on. If the light is off he just stares in there from the hallway. He had to be rocked to sleep Monday night. When I said to him that it was time for bed, he immediately went into panic mode, would not lay down in his crib even though I told him I was going to stay with him. I rocked him to sleep and left his door open instead of closing it, and he did not wake up that night, thank goodness. Last night I had class and my mom came to babysit. I got home early enough to put him to bed, and since he hadn't shown any anxiety during bedtime rituals, I decided to try to put him to bed like before. He turned on his music box and laid down, no problem. He even hugged and kissed me goodnight, but when I turned off the light and closed the door he freaked out, climbed out of his crib. Even though I lowered the base to the very bottom, he still found a way out and came running toward the door. I opened it immediately. Of course, he ran to my mom who was sitting on the couch and sat with her. He just kept looking over her shoulder toward his room like there was something there. I ended up rocking him to sleep and he was fine. My son talks a little bit and the only weird thing he has done is point into the hallway and say "Dada, Dada" when his dad isn't home. I have a dog and a cat and neither of them act out of the ordinary. I have never felt cold spots in that room, had goosebumps, heard voices, heard footsteps, or anything of that nature in this room. None of his toys go missing or get moved to different places than where I left them, and nothing gets stacked. I have not seen anything since my childhood encounter and have never felt watched or creeped out until my son started acting this way. We have not had any relatives pass away recently, and I can't think of any reason for a spirit to present itself now. I guess I am looking for some understanding in regards to what is happening. My husband works 2 night shifts a week and I am really creeped out in my own house right now. I have been praying extensively in his room every night before I put him to bed. I just don't want him to be scared of his own room. I want him to feel safe, but I'm finding it hard to reassure him when I am a little scared myself. Any advice and or comments are welcome. What should I do? Was just that scared, but I passed out since then. That feeling of being watched constantly hasn't stopped, and last night it came back. I see it now like I see but I feel it always. It stands like any normal human, but when it walks, it's very animalistic, crouching, walking on all fours naturally. My imagination adds wings and small horns to go with those eyes, though I can't say for certain that its demonic sister seems to think it is she, and her boyfriend seem to think I accidentally opened some sort of portal while cleaning the garage. I went so far as to get out of bed tonight and smudge my bedroom, telling it to go away and that I didn't want it near me. The feeling of it being there just got stronger. It's currently 4:40, so I've been writing for an hour or so. I smudged about an hour and a half ago, and the cat's acting strange again. I'll honestly say it, I hope I'm just crazy. I wish it would stop. Allow me to introduce myself a bit, seeing as how I'm new here. I'm currently 19, living with my fiancé and my cat and dog. I'm a full-time worker and housewife with no children, living in my birth town of Abilene, Texas. I'm very opinionated and tend to speak my mind, and both my man and I try to rationalize everything we can. Sadly, sometimes it just doesn't work. My first paranormal experience that I can actually remember and not blame on child imagination was when I was 11, just after my 10th birthday. My mother, father, and myself, moved into my great-grandmother's house when I was 7 to help take care of her. I had always slept in the bedroom above the cellar, or in the small bedroom closet connected to it until I was 11. That's when I got the bright idea that, like my brother, who'd moved in with us for a time, I wanted to sleep in the cellar. So we cleaned it up, painted it shallow pond blue, and moved me and I drifted back and forth between the cellar and the room above it for about a year because, when I was down there, I had this uncanny feeling that I wasn't alone. Things would happen that I dismiss as my imagination or faulty memory. Sounds, movement in the shadows, the feeling of being watched, and things being moved when no one was in the room. When I'd move out, Mom and I would hear a strange thumping on the floor beneath us, or in the closet room for a couple weeks, then it'd stop. She always told me that I had unlocked something, but I never paid her any mind, thinking she was trying to scare me until the last time I moved down there. I was 12 by this time, and lying in bed one night I couldn't sleep, and it was very late. I remember turning towards the wall, and my hand hit a hollow spot in the concrete. Then everything got very still, quiet. This feeling of being in danger came over me, and when I looked towards the foot of my bed, by the door, there was a woman there. She was tall, fey-like, with long, black hair and sapphire eyes, wearing a thin, white night dress, and she was drenched and angry. It was as if I'd disrupted her. For the next 2 years, when she was around, she'd always be in that same spot, but there'd be another there, a man, taller, but with similar features, dressed in black pants and a white shirt. I came to call him Angelo, after learning, through the woman herself, that her name was, and that's when I learned that I'm able to know a spirit's name, possible age, and how they died, if they allow me to know when and was near. Angelo would usually be sitting at the foot of my bed, shaking my leg to wake me or shaking the bed itself. I tried to figure out a natural explanation for it to ease myself, but never could. Roughly 6 months before moving to Clyde, Angelo began to fade, and began to change. I'd be best in explaining her as looking very grudge-like, save that she crawled on the floor, rather than the walls, and preferred screaming. I've had many experiences with ghosts and such since moving to Clyde, mainly with 2 children who were killed during the Civil War, and the old cotton gin owner whose name was Hank and who hated women, but that's not important as of yet. Almost 2 years ago now, I lost a pendant that I was given when I was 10. A tiger's eye stone that had been in the family for generations. I went to bed one night with it on my bracelet, woke up with it missing. I don't lie when I tell you that I tore my room apart, looking for it. I had everything from stuffed animals and clothes to my bed in the hallway and kitchen, searching, and, for some reason, stopped her screaming, mostly, and her hating. That next night I've yet to find my pendant, but Anne's eyes are blue again, as they'd gone red, and she speaks in mostly comprehensible sentences when she speaks, but something's wrong these days. Now, to make things clear, I don't see ghosts the way I see this computer or my man. Its mental image is the mind's eye, but it's different from imagination. It's that sort of I see it like I would see a memory, but also like it's right in front of me image. It's hard to explain in writing at 4:15 a.m. Now then, and doesn't scare. She never has. She's one of those, though I walk through the shadow of the valley of death, I shall fear no evil. 'Cause I'm the baddest on the block type people. And yet, things changed when we moved into the house we're in now. It started simple enough. I was sitting in the living room alone at the computer with the dog when I heard my bedside table drawers slam shut, just my nerves, and then the back doors slammed shut. All the doors were locked. Things popped up here and there for a few months after that. Then one day, while my man was asleep and I was in the living room, the keys by the door fell off the wall. With their sticky hooks I could pass this off, since sticky hooks don't last long, save for the fact that his keys landed 3 feet away and said keys, his hook, and my keys still on their hook, made a perfect right angle. Okay, still could happen, so I set the keys aside and went to take a shower. Needless to say, I wasn't too enthused about a large hand slapping the shower curtain and the cabinet door slamming shut, only to find out that my sleep-all-day fiancée was, well, still asleep. And then, the thing that bothered me most was seeing and crawl into the bedroom, looking as though she herself had just seen a ghost, no pun intended, followed by a black smoke that I saw as clearly as I see this screen. It ducked under the door, swirled about, and disappeared. None of the alarms had gone off, and there was no smell or smoke after that, save for residual effect from a fire. Nothing happened until about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I was feeling restless, what with my man not being home that night, so I decided I was going to clean the garage, so I set up the radio, pushed my truck into the drive, and proceeded to do just that. I began to have that feeling of being watched, but it wasn't the feeling of Anne's eyes, which I'm quite used to and am now comforted by, and it wasn't the feeling of human company per usual. I tried to pass it off as nerves until my sister got home and saw me cleaning. I must have said something that I wouldn't usually say, because she got this strained, though understanding, look and insisted that I tell her if I needed anything. The next few nights were unnerving, though not too unusual. The third night Levi had been back home. We were lying in bed, and I was trying to relax and go to sleep, so I did what I'd used to do, hoping it would help. I closed my eyes, relaxed my body, and put all my energy into creating an image, a golden light seeping from my chest to light the entire room in my mind. And just as I was starting to doze off, the only thing left unlit was the ceiling and the door. When the light began to touch the door, I felt a push, physically, and saw a figure standing over me. The only thing I had time to make out before I pushed back, more in my mind with the light, was that this figure was tall, shadow black, with red slit pupil eyes. I'm not sure if I was truly that tired, or if I was just that scared, but I passed out since then. That feeling of being watched, constantly, hasn't stopped, and last night, it came back. I see it now like I see, but I feel it always. It stands like any normal human, but when it walks, it's very animalistic, crouching, walking on all fours naturally. My imagination adds wings and small horns to go with those eyes, though I can't say for certain that its demonic sister seems to think it is. She and her boyfriend seem to think I accidentally opened some sort of portal while cleaning the garage. I went so far as to get out of bed tonight and smudge my bedroom, telling it to go away and that I didn't want it near me. The feeling of it being there just got stronger. It's currently 4:40, so I've been writing for an hour or so. I smudged about an hour and a half ago, and the cat's acting strange again. I'll honestly say it, I hope I'm just crazy. Is my house haunted? I'd like to start off by saying this is my first post, but after reading a lot of the stories on this site, I know I can get some sincere answers. I am 28 years old and live in Dallas, Texas. For as long as I can remember, I have felt the presence of something or somethings around me. When I was around 4 or 5, my family and I moved to our house in Dallas, Texas. Everything from what I remembered seemed fine up until a few years after moving. And let me also state that our house is built from an 1800 Spanish mission church that the previous owners had bought back to Dallas. It's hard to explain, but a lot of things in my house are from that Spanish mission church. Everything from our front door, that is a huge wooden door with latches for locks and a metal handle for a doorknob even. Our sinks in the bathrooms were made from the tiles from the church, and even actual tiles of our kitchen floor are said to be the exact tiles from this church. I've looked and looked for the church name, but have had no luck so far, not even with my parents, because they don't believe me. Now that we have had some background, I'll begin by saying I remember being 14 and making a sandwich late at night. Everyone was either asleep or in their rooms while making the sandwich. I could feel something by me, so I turned thinking it was my brother, but nothing was there, so I kept making my sandwich thinking it was just my imagination until I hear my name being yelled right by my right ear. It was the scariest and creepiest voice I've ever heard, and typing this gives me goosebumps thinking about it again. Well, as soon as I heard my name being yelled in my ear, I took off running through the house. Don't know why I was running. It wasn't like I had a lot of room to run from something. I also would hear my name being called a lot, but more like from a distance. Never was it like that one night, thank God. I would always go to my parents' room or ask them what they wanted once I heard my name being called, and they would always say they didn't say anything. It happened so much they took me to an ear doctor when I was 15. Fast forward a few more years, and I'm in college for my freshman year. I would always wake up like I had no energy and feel like I didn't get any sleep. I didn't understand, but didn't really think about it too much since I was in college and you're supposed to be tired. Until one night my roommate in the dorm said they heard my talking in my sleep. As they turned to look over at my area in the room, he saw a shadowy figure standing over my bed looking at me. He thought it was my girlfriend at the time and told her to leave before we got into trouble, since we couldn't have girls in the dorms past certain time at night. Once he told her to leave, he said something stared right at him, and he said that he never felt such fear in his life. He actually moved out into his own room about 5 weeks after that experience. It took him a while to tell me that something was standing over my bed because he thought it was a dream until things would start moving, like books would fall off the shelves. Bathroom paper would be thrown over the room, etc., but that could be just college dorm pranks. But he did move out weeks after this event had happened. My question is, how long has this been happening to me, and could this be why I have no energy when I wake up? No matter how many hours of sleep I got. A lot of people have told me they don't think it's my house because ghosts or supernatural events happen at locations and not actual artifacts, but I'm not sure how true that is or not. I'm sorry this was so long, but I need real help here because now I'm living with my fiancé and I've been seeing shadowy figures out of the corner of my eyes all the time, no matter daytime or nighttime. My dog has stopped even going into my room now and will just sit right by the door. Please, if anybody has any ideas, please let me know, as I need some serious help here, and not one person from my family believes me or has admitted to having any experiences like me, which makes me think something is wrong even though I'm not crazy or have any type of medical or mental issues. Just one last kiss. My mom passed peacefully in her sleep in April 2005. She was the glue that helped keep the family together. She was the most spiritual person in the entire family. My mom died in Australia, where the family migrated to back in the late 50s. I was here in Athens, Greece, when she passed. I got one of those calls in the middle of the night. You know the ones I mean. I knew my mom had passed. My daughter, Gia, called, but she didn't have to say anything. I took off to my mom's sister Zoe's. It was the best I could do to feel closer to Mom. Once there, I collapsed in a heap. It feels as though somebody has ripped out a part of your heart. You never quite feel whole again. Lying on the bed crying and calling for Mom, I asked her to send me a sign if anybody could do that from the afterlife. It was her. Then I felt it. The soft touch of her hand gently caressed my wet cheek. Was it my imagination? Was she really there in the spirit, trying to comfort me? Aunt Zoe told me I had to pull myself together because I had things to do and I had to do them before it was too late, thinking it was something spiritual to do with Mom's passing. I asked her what I had to do. I was devastated to hear her say that I had to make a claim on my inheritance before my two sisters took everything. My response to Aunt Zoe was, I don't want any of her material things. All I want is one last kiss from my mom. I would give anything for one last kiss. Just one last kiss. Soon after, Gia called again from Australia. Mom, I took something from Nan's bedroom for you to remember her by. She said it was nothing much and it was almost finished, but at least it was something personal, and she knew how much it would mean to me. My mom never ever left the house without this. It was almost out and she'd not had the chance to buy a new one. My daughter had secreted my mom's favorite lipstick from her dressing table. She mailed it to me and I got my one last kiss. Mom had heard my wish. Sometime later, again I was feeling fretful. I had my candile lit and next to it, I had placed one of my favorite photos of Mom. Again, I felt the need for contact with her. I prayed and begged for another sign, but nothing would come. I apologized for doubting that I had actually felt her caressing my cheek and promised I would never doubt again and begged for another sign. My question was, Mom, was it you who got Gia to send me the lipstick so I could have my one last kiss? Poof! The flame of my candile went out. There was my sign. It upset me that a month had passed and I hadn't seen Mom in my dreams at all, and one night, there she was. She appeared as she did in another of my favorite photos, young, extremely beautiful, and very much alive in this dream. I saw her in the back garden of our house in Australia. On the one side we had a lawn and then a low stone wall, and behind that was a lemon tree and a vegetable garden. Mom started rising up from behind the stone wall and she was smiling at me as I watched. She rose higher and higher until she was out of sight. As she rose, I cried out for her to please not go, but she responded by raising her hand and waving goodbye. I know to the day when I had that dream. I called Australia and the family had just come back from church. Gia told me that they had just held Mom's 40-day memorial service. Within the Orthodox religion, it is believed that the spirit remains earth-bound for 40 days before it crosses over. I was not present at my mom's most important memorial service, but I got something from her that I will always cherish. I got my one last caress, I got my one last kiss, and I got my one last goodbye. Lady in the hallway. When I was 4 years old, my parents bought a house that was built in the early 1950s. Being as young as I was, I didn't know the history of the house or who owned it before we moved there. My bedroom was the middle room located along the long hallway in our house. My sister's room was at the front end of the hallway near the living room, and my parents' room was at the back end of the hallway near the kitchen. We lived in a suburban neighborhood, so our next door neighbor's house was situated very close ours. He had installed a security light on the side of his house. that faced my bedroom window. This light was very bright and made it hard for me to fall asleep some nights. Needless to say, I never needed a nightlight and was able to see quite well in the dark. When I was about 10 or 11 years old, I woke up in the middle of the night to use the restroom. The house was dark and everyone else was asleep. As I stepped into the hallway, I noticed someone in a long nightgown with long hair standing there looking at me. In the dark, it looked like my sister. My sister was notorious for sleepwalking, so I told her to go back to bed. The person didn't move. I reached out to touch her to guide her back to her room, and my hand went through the person and hit the wall behind her. I got a little scared and went to my sister's room to see if she was there. Sure enough, she was lying in bed asleep. I even touched her face to make sure it was her. So I head back down the hall, because I still had to use the restroom. The person in the long nightgown had turned to face me coming down the hall from my sister's room and watched me walk past her to the bathroom. When I was done in the bathroom, I went back to my room with my eyes closed and felt my way along the hall, so I didn't see the lady girl in the nightgown again. It wasn't easy to go back to sleep after that, but for once I was glad to have the security light streaming in my window. The next morning, I mentioned to my mom about the lady girl in the nightgown I saw in the hallway. My mom told me that on several occasions, when she would open the door from the kitchen to the hall, she would see a person in a nightgown running down the hall towards mine and my sister's bedrooms. At first, she thought it was us playing around past our bedtimes, but she would check on us and we would be asleep in our beds. Another time, many years later, around 2002, one morning my dad was at home alone and asleep in bed. He heard the floorboards creaking from footsteps walking down the hallway. He said the footsteps stopped in his doorway and he could feel someone watching him. It was already daylight outside, so he could have seen if someone was standing there, but there wasn't anyone else home. Other occurrences were kitchen cabinets being opened and lights being switched on when no one was in the room. When I was in my teens, I was finally told that the previous owners of the house was an elderly man and his wife. The man passed away, and the woman got so depressed she shot herself in the house. When my parents bought the house, they were led to believe the woman killed herself in the bathtub, but one summer, after living in the house for 15 plus years, we noticed dark brown spots that seeped through the paint on the kitchen ceiling. We figured out she hadn't done it in the bathtub, but rather in the kitchen. My dad sold the house in about 2005. I was sad because that was my childhood home. I was never scared of the ghost. I wish he still lived there so I could try to communicate with her. Now that I know more about ghost hunting, from what I could tell, she was just trying to let us know she was there and never intended to scare or harm us.
Haunted house. I just moved into a new house with my family. It's an old house that was made in the 70s. My kids were excited to finally get out of the apartment and into a house. The only bad thing was that we weren't the only ones living in that house. On the first night, my husband and I heard a banging downstairs. We thought it was nothing, so we went back to sleep. A couple hours after the banging, we heard a crash. My husband went downstairs to check out what happened. He came back up and told me that the vase fell off the table. We assumed that the wind might have knocked it down, so we went back to sleep again. We had no more troubles that night, but the next day we did. When my son came back from school, he went into the living room. I heard him scream and run out. I thought he might have seen a bat or a bird come out of the chimney, so I chuckled to myself at how he screamed, but he had a different story. He told me that he saw a man floating above the table. I went to go check, but when I got there I saw nothing. My son was shaking and kept telling me there was a man there and that he wasn't lying. Later on, when it got dark, I went to my room to put away some clothing. When I walked in, the room felt colder than it should have. I went to go check the thermostat and it read 70 degrees, but in the room it felt like 50 degrees. I went back in my room and saw a man floating above my bed. I was petrified. The man was tall and had a red beard and hair. I couldn't see his eyes because all I saw was black holes. As soon as he appeared, he disappeared. I stumbled down the stairs and reached for the phone. I dialed my husband's work number and told him what had just happened. His response was a laugh and asked me if I was getting tired or something. Knowing that he didn't believe me worried me even more, so what I did was gather my kids and drove down to my sister's house. I didn't want to stay in a house with a ghost in it. When I got to my sister's house, I told her what had happened. She also didn't believe me and told me that the stress of moving to a new house was getting to me. I stayed at her house overnight, then went back to the house the next day. I was a little shaky and was a little afraid, but I calmed my nerves so I wouldn't worry my children. When my kids went to school and my husband went to work again, I was alone at the house. It was raining outside and was foggy, which made staying at home even worse. I was in the kitchen washing the dishes when I heard a loud bang in the dining room. I went to go check it out, and once I left the kitchen I heard a smash in the kitchen. I ran back to kitchen and saw that all of the plates, cups, and glasses were all smashed all over the floor. When I looked up I saw the ghost again. He looked at me, smiled, and told me to get out. I ran out of the kitchen and into my car and drove away from the house. I called my husband and told him that I wanted to move now, but he told me that we weren't moving because we already bought the house and that we saved up a lot to get it. When I heard his answer, I went to the church and asked for the priest. When I got to him, I asked him to come bless my house. He asked why, and I told him the reason why. He agreed to come and bless my house. When I brought him to my house, he began to preach, pray, and went around my house splashing holy water everywhere. Once he left, I felt a little bit better. 2 days have passed and there were no signs of the ghost, but I know he's still in my house. I can feel his presence. Hauntings in Vegas. I was visiting my best girlfriend in Vegas last year, and she has a gorgeous mansion in Henderson, Nevada, 10 minutes from the Strip. The first night, I woke up to the feeling of being watched, but more than that, I was sleeping but saw a dark shadowed man leaning over me. I figured it was a dream and went back to sleep. The next day I told my friend and she confessed that her place was haunted. I believe in that stuff, but brushed it off. We went out for lunch, and when we came back, all my stuff in the closet was thrown onto the floor. Apparently the closet is where it likes to stay, and it was angry. I put my stuff in there, still not believing. I figured it was her little brother or something. I put my stuff back and went to take a shower. That was a bad idea. While I was showering, the shower curtain blew in with full force into me while I was taking a shower, and scared me. Took all my courage to open the curtain, but nothing was there. However, the steam on the walls was dripping and the condensation was red. I went out to the main room and my friend was sleeping. I asked her if she had opened a window, but she wasn't even awake, so she couldn't have. I went back into the bathroom and there was a swirl drawn into the steam on the mirror. We go about our day and I tell her about all this. She's shocked and simply says, "I guess he doesn't like you. He's never been that bad with other people that have slept over. I really think it's because you're a Catholic and you're wearing the cross. I once tried putting candles and holy water in the room, but he knocked stuff over when I came back in." I'm thinking, what am I doing in this house? They moved into the house a few years ago and everything was fine then. One night my friend woke up to the smell of something burning. She walked around, looked, nothing. She got back in bed. She woke up again to her closet light on, balcony open, and overhead lights on. That's not all. The fire alarm was going off. She gets up, opens the door, and the alarm goes silent. She figures someone is burning something outside. She was sleepwalking or something, and gets back in bed again. The alarm goes off. Then the one in front of her mom's room alarms, and they smell the burning smoke, burning hair smell. Her dog at this point is going nuts, so barking at the closet and then running out of the room, and barking at her room, not going in. This went on for hours until she went into her mom's room, went under the covers and slept it out. Ever since, things have happened daily. Finally, it was time for me to go, and it was my last night there. Go to bed, no problems with the balcony open, but a large rock holding it only partially open. I go to sleep. I wake up around 3 a.m. and all the lights are on, the television is blasting, and my friend is sound asleep, so I know she didn't turn anything on. Her dog is staring at the closet frozen. The balcony is wide open and the rock is outside on the balcony. If you're thinking it's the dog, this rock weighed at least 25 pounds. I was freaking out but just kind of tried to keep calm because he knew when you were scared, so I got up and talked to him saying, "If you want to watch TV, that's fine. I'm turning down the volume so I can sleep, that's all." I turned it down and went to sleep. That was my experience in Vegas, and I know a lot of other people have had weird things happen in Las Vegas. I believed in ghosts before, but this, unexplainable.
Hooded figure watching me on October 11th, 2008. I went to bed after watching a horror movie called Somebody Help Me. The movie ended around midnight, and soon afterwards I fell straight to sleep in my room. Then about 2 hours later, I felt I was half dreaming and half awake, and I could see my room and I was aware of everything as if I hadn't been asleep but just laying there in the dark. I was lying in my bed on my stomach with the covers up to my face. I had the impression that I was awake and not dreaming. It felt so real to me, and I could feel a presence. I felt that the presence had intentionally woke me up so I could acknowledge that it was there. I looked up at my closet door, which is kind of facing my bed. I always keep my closet door open, never closed. On the top of the closet door I saw a dark hooded figure sitting there, looking my way, and its right hand it was holding a long shaft-like thing, although I could not see its face because it was just dark. It was as if it had no face, and what made that uncanny to me was that I knew it was looking at me. So, while I was still laying down with my blanket over me, all these thoughts were going through my head. Should I scream, get up, etc.? I thought about getting up, but it never really fathomed me to actually get up and run out of the room. I'm guessing because I have a 2-year-old daughter who sleeps with me every night, so I wouldn't dream of ever leaving her alone in a situation of that sort. The fact that I was actually contemplating thoughts in my head alarmed me that I could very indeed be kind of awake, because whenever I have bad dreams, it's like I know that I'm dreaming. I just tell myself, "T.O. wake up in my dream," and I do. This situation was as if I was already awake, so I didn't even think T.O. say wake up, and while still looking at it, although it said nothing, I knew that it was sensing my upcoming fear, as if it could read my thoughts. It never spoke to me, but I knew what it was thinking. For some reason, I knew that it was getting pleasure from sensing my fear and lack of knowledge of not knowing what the thing was and why it was there. Me as a person, I loathe being frightened, especially at night when I'm feeling helpless, so eventually my terror turned into anticipated anger because it knew that it was really getting to me. I do not remember speaking, but I do remember having thoughts in my head about Jesus. I was saying things about Jesus in my head and trying to quote some verses from the Bible angrily at the apparition. When I'm mad, I'm feisty, and I'm not going to fall back ever in an argument until I know I've won. I was communicating with the thing through my head. I was thinking loudly in my head, "In Jesus' name, leave me alone," etc. Then I remember drifting back to sleep unafraid. I could kind of sense that it felt struck dumb with taciturn thoughts because I wasn't paying any mind to it anymore. When I woke up around 6 a.m., it was not there. I am 19 years old, and twice before in the past year I had similar dreams, but this time was actually more pleasant compared to the other 2 times. In those 2 times, I had the same dream twice, and everything I felt in that one I also felt it in this situation, except in this situation the black hooded figure was in the air floating. It had its wavy arms, hands pointing towards me as if it was putting some kind of spell or something over me. My whole body felt numb. You know how it feels when your leg falls asleep? Well, that is what my whole body felt like. I wanted to scream for my mother, but it was as if I could not, although I didn't really try.